Woke up at 5:47 with a wet sock. BC, one of the kids spilled juice last night, and no one told me. Stood there in the dark kitchen holding my foot like a sad flamingo and thought, this is it, huh? This is the whole life now. Woke up way before my alarm, when not even the coffee machine had started doing its thing. And yeah, wet foot. Someone spilled juice by the fridge. Probably Liam. He's the only one who drinks orange juice in 2 steps. First without a straw, then with. And of course, no one wiped it up. Or mentioned it. I just stood there in the semi-dark kitchen on one leg, sock dripping, looking out the window where the sky hadn't even started hinting at morning. It didn't feel like morning, honestly. More like the night just decided not to end and we all pretended that was normal. While I was trying to wipe my foot with a dish towel, the living room TV practically exploded with Bluey at full blast. The little one was already up, curled around a throw pillow in his pajamas that should have been washed 2 days ago. I went in and turned the volume down, and he looked up at me with his giant, serious eyes and asked if he could have the marshmallow cereal for breakfast. I just nodded. Because arguing with a 3-year-old at 6 a.m. is like arguing with the sky. Pointless and exhausting. Mike was already at the kitchen table. Same gray sweatpants from yesterday. Hoodie with the old coffee stain that might actually be permanent by now. Didn't even glance up when I came in. Didn't shift when I set the coffee in front of him. Just mumbled, "Oh, thanks." Like I was some barista at a hotel cafe and not his wife / the mother of his kids / woman who just stepped in sticky juice before sunrise. In the bathroom, the kids launched into World War III over toothpaste. The youngest wanted the strawberry one. The oldest said that was for babies. And Liam, of course, skipped the debate entirely and started brushing his teeth with hand soap. All of this happening while I was digging through the dryer looking for 2 matching socks, and obviously ended up with 1 white and 1 pink. I wore them both. Yes, I'm that woman who walks around in mismatched socks, and I'm honestly fine with that. Or close to fine. Then came Safeway. Van started on the 3rd try, windows immediately fogged up, and I smeared a blurry handprint on the windshield that looked kind of like a map of nowhere. Turned on a podcast about mental health but didn't really hear any of it. Just needed someone's voice in the background while I drove between raindrops and tried not to forget to buy chicken and juice and bread and paper towels. Spoiler, I forgot the paper towels. At the store, the cashier snapped at me because I scanned the Apple discount wrong or something. I didn't even argue, just mumbled, "It's okay," and nodded like I was apologizing for existing. I've started living in this space lately, where being right doesn't matter, and all you want is for no one to raise their voice. On the way home, I turned everything off. No podcast, no radio. Just silence and the windshield wipers and this sentence stuck in my head. When was the last time someone asked how I'm actually doing? And it stayed there. All day. Back home, same drill. Coats off, backpacks down, homework check. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for assigning find 10 adjectives in your fridge. Are you kidding me? Search for Liam's other shoe. Found it in the laundry basket. Wiped yogurt off the couch armrest. How does yogurt even get there? Started a load of laundry, loaded the dishwasher, checked that my daughter wasn't hiding under the blanket with the tablet again. And that was all before lunch. At some point, I just sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. Not even sure why. Maybe to check the weather or something? But my fingers opened TikTok instead. There it was. My old account from a year ago, made for recipes. No posts. No followers. Just sitting there. I stared at it like it was a photo of someone I used to know. Someone who thought she could do things for herself. And, weirdly, I decided to try. Not because I believed it would work. Just because, honestly, how much worse could it get? At 11:48 p.m., after everyone was asleep, I quietly fried some French toast with the leftover bread, sliced up the last strawberries, propped my phone up on a cup with toothpicks, don't judge my tripod, and whispered my way through the steps so I wouldn't wake anyone. Just showed what I always do. No makeup, old t-shirt. My voice shook a little, but it was warm. I posted it, closed the app. Didn't expect anything. It wasn't about likes. It just was. Later that night, Liam woke up and needed to pee. I held his hand in the dark while he walked with his eyes closed and whispered, "Don't let go." And at that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked. TikTok. Your post is getting attention. I didn't even smile. I just stood there. Is this something? Like, actually something? The next morning, my phone was buzzing from the earliest light, even though I'd supposedly set it to silent. Half asleep, I reached out, thinking it was just regular spam notifications, like, you haven't logged into your fitness app in a while. Ha ha, thanks, I know. But it turned out to be TikTok. A bunch of times. I opened the app and froze. That exact video with the French toast, which I'd filmed in my old t-shirt in the middle of the night, had already gained over 14,000 views. Not likes, not autoplay stats. Actual views. Real people were watching. Real people. I was scrolling through the comments and honestly, my hands almost started shaking. Someone said my voice was like a mom who doesn't rush you. Someone else wrote that the video feels like a safe place. There was a comment in English from some man. I watched this 5 times. It feels like calm. Thank you, I didn't know what to do with it. I just sat in bed in the dark, wearing my old pajama pants, watching the numbers climb. It was a strange feeling, like someone had randomly found a sketch you drew on a bad day and told you it was the realest thing they'd seen. In the morning, while the kids were drawing on paper towels, Sophie called it napkin cartoons, because they're easier to come up with stories on. I propped my phone up on the windowsill and decided to film another video. Potato pancakes. The most basic kind. The ones Grandma used to make in a thick-bottomed pan. The kind that always smelled a little like onion even if you didn't use any. I didn't prepare anything, just laid everything out the way it was. I filmed myself chopping dill, mixing sour cream with salt, flipping the pancakes gently so they wouldn't fall apart. I whispered the whole time. Not because it's trendy, but because Liam was asleep in the next room, and by now it felt like whispering had become my new way of existing. At the end, Sophie ran into the frame, hugged her doll, and asked if she could film herself making mom soup next time. I didn't manage to turn the camera off in time. Later I watched the footage, wanted to cut that part, but didn't. Left it in, and it turned out to be the best part. The comments came flooding in. The baby is like a beam of light. Reminded me of childhood. The whole day passed in a haze. Mike, as usual, was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and headphones, occasionally getting up for coffee. He asked why I hadn't bought filters. I nodded, said I forgot. He didn't ask how my night went, or why I looked like I hadn't slept. It was the same as always, as if nothing had changed, as if I hadn't just become that mom on TikTok, the one someone said had a voice that helps them fall asleep. In the evening, we were sitting on the floor with the kids, trying to finish an old dinosaur puzzle, the one where half the corners are missing, and the box is held together with tape. And right at that moment, I got another notification. 10,000 followers. I didn't get what it meant at first. The number felt abstract, but the feeling didn't. It was very specific, like someone had come up, sat next to me and said, "You matter," without a reason. Just because. I went to the bathroom, and while the kids were splashing in the tub, I painted my nails. Light beige, almost invisible. Just to remember that I have hands, that I'm not just a functional being that cooks, wipes things, and loads the dishwasher, but a woman. I honestly can't remember the last time I did that. Later that night, I got a message from an old acquaintance from a mom group. Something like, "Wow, you're trending? That's so cool. Honestly, a bit jealous." And I froze. What are you even supposed to say to that? Thanks? Yeah, I'm shocked too. Well, at least someone sees me? I just sent a heart emoji and locked the screen. Closer to night, one thought kept circling in my head. If even a stranger said I sounded like home, why has no one close to me ever said that? Why do I have to go online just to be noticed? By the way, the next morning my oldest son told me someone at school recognized me. Said he had a mom from Cozy TikTok. He seemed to like it. Didn't say he was proud, but I saw him straighten his shoulders a little. Mike, on the other hand, shut down. He heard it and said nothing, but I saw the way his jaw clenched, like someone had said something wrong, like I broke a rule we hadn't agreed on, like I started stepping out of a boundary he found comfortable. I didn't say anything, just wiped the table and went to load the laundry. That evening, a small kitchenware brand sent a request. They wanted to send a whisk and asked me to tag them in my next video if I liked it. No money, just a gesture. I didn't think long. I agreed. Not because I need a free whisk, but because for the first time in a long time, someone offered me something not out of habit, not because I should, but simply because I'm me. Before bed, I opened the Notes app on my phone, wrote down a draft. 10 breakfasts you can make without saying a word. Not to post, just to let the idea exist. Sometimes it feels like everything I do lives separately from my real life, as if my videos happen in some parallel room where it's quiet, calm, and warm, and the real kitchen, the real home, the kids, Mike, all of that exists in a completely different reality, where that coziness doesn't reach and where any movement towards something of my own immediately triggers either passive aggression or, on the contrary, icy silence that makes you want to scream. But instead you go and film because apparently that's the only place where you're allowed to speak, and even then, in a whisper. That day I just wanted to make an omelet. Nothing special, just eggs and butter, slightly browned edges. The kind that in childhood meant mom's in a good mood today. And I set my phone on the stand, turned on the mic, put on an old gray t-shirt that's just comfortable, and as soon as I said the phrase, "It should stick a little," "That's okay," I heard Mike slap his hand on the table kind of sharply, not super hard, probably not even on purpose, but enough to make me stop and look at him. And he, without even glancing in my direction, just said, "Doing your ASMR thing again, huh?" And didn't wait for an answer because he was already back in his screen, like he hadn't said anything at all, like I was just background noise, accidental sound, not a person. I turned off the recording, put away the phone, went to the bathroom, closed the door behind me, sat down on the toilet, covered the lid with a towel, set the phone on a cup of cotton swabs and started filming again. The lighting was bad in there. The walls bounced the sound around, and I was speaking almost only with my lips, but the video still came out kind of especially alive, though maybe just because at that moment I really needed to feel like someone was hearing me, even if it was just the mic in my phone. That video went viral. I didn't even understand right away what was happening, but the comments started coming in one after another. People wrote that it felt like the silence before school, that their mom used to make eggs with burnt edges too, that they're crying and don't know why, and I just sat there, looking at the screen, not understanding how something I did on the fly in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, could cause such a storm in someone. I didn't tell Mike about it, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I instinctively felt that if I said it out loud and let myself be happy, it would be like flipping a switch and everything would go gray again. In the morning, we ran out of milk. I opened the fridge while pouring the kids their cereal and just froze. No carton, not even an empty one. Just a bare shelf and a bottle of ketchup off to the side. I closed the door without a word, set the bowl down on the table, and then Mike walked into the kitchen looking at his phone, passed by me, and without even really addressing me said, "You've got an audience now. Maybe they'll load the dishwasher too." And I didn't understand right away whether it was a joke or a jab, but from his tone, probably the second, because he didn't say it with a smile or sarcasm, just that cold matter-of-factness, like he was stating something obvious, and it made me feel kind of gross inside, like he dumped something sticky on me, and I don't know where that kind of irritation comes from in people when you start doing something for yourself. But I definitely recognized it. It's the same feeling as when you feel like you're bothering people just by existing a little differently than they expected. A couple days later, the shower broke. The water came out either boiling hot or like an icy stream. The handle turned loose like it wasn't attached properly, and I quietly asked Mike to take a look, just to see if he could figure it out, and he didn't even turn around, just muttered, "You've got influence now. Post a story, maybe someone will fix it." And it wasn't said with malice or mockery, just detachment, like I'm no longer part of this house, but somewhere in the internet version of myself, and maybe he's not even against it, but he's definitely not planning to help me get there. When I was coming back from the store and riding the elevator with bags that smelled like apples and bread, our neighbor Rhonda, the one with the little dog and the fuzzy cardigan that always catches on her buttons, looked at me and suddenly said, "My nephews watch you. You're so real." And I nodded, smiled, said, "Thank you," and immediately buried my face in the bag. But when I closed the apartment door, my knees kind of gave out. Not because she said something bad, but because the fact that someone from real life recognized the part of me that I hide even from myself was so strange. Because it felt both nice and terrifying at the same time. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Sophie was standing by the stool stirring ketchup and water, proudly announcing that it was her surprise pancake, like in Mommy's video. And it was so ridiculous and sweet that I laughed out loud. And even though the laugh was soft and short, it was real. And maybe that was the first moment in a week where I felt like something inside me could still breathe, even if just a little. That same evening, Mike put a store-bought container on the table, sat down alone, didn't call anyone, didn't ask if the kids had eaten, just ate, like this was his territory that he was marking, with his portion, his silence, his expression of, "I'm not part of your game," and, when I walked past, he threw out, "You don't cook for us anymore anyway, just for your content." And I didn't stop, didn't turn, just went and filmed a video about apple tea that helps you not scream. No voice, just water sounds, the kettle, the boiling noise, and drops from the faucet. And people in the comments wrote that it was like meditation, but I wasn't filming it for them. I did it because I didn't know what else to do and needed something for my hands to do. Late at night, when everyone had gone off to their rooms, Mike came into the kids' room, looked at the toys scattered on the floor, sighed kind of theatrically and said, "Maybe you should teach the kids to clean up after themselves, since you're teaching everyone else now," and left. Didn't wait for a response, didn't look at me, just disappeared into the bedroom, leaving behind that feeling, like you're not keeping up not because you're not trying, but because it's your own fault for daring to be something more than just convenient. I stayed standing in the hallway, leaning on the door frame, and in the silence that hung after he left, it smelled like apple and vanilla. From that same tea no one else had tried, because it wasn't for them. It was for me, and apparently I'm not really for them anymore either. The morning started as usual. Someone was already waiting in line for the bathroom. Someone couldn't find their second sock. The kettle was bubbling with yesterday's water, and the kitchen air had the taste of toast I didn't manage to pull out of the toaster in time. But in the middle of all this chaos came a notification I didn't even understand at first. BuzzFeed. a list of 15 coziest TikTok moms, and I was in it. With that very video where I'm without makeup, in an old t-shirt, flipping pancakes in a frying pan with a chipped handle and speaking quietly so I don't wake the kids. And I felt this little sting inside me, either joy or fear. Because up until this point, it all felt like a game, and now it became something visible, real, maybe a bit too real. The followers were growing at some kind of insane pace, thousands per hour, and I didn't even have time to read the comments, just little hearts flashing, icons, notifications, like someone was constantly hitting refresh, and I felt like laughing or hiding, because I was still standing barefoot on sticky linoleum trying to smear peanut butter, hardened in the jar, across some bread. Mike came home with a bag from Trader Joe's, set it on the table with a kind of theatrical effort, then turned and said, "Oh, you're done filming. Now we can eat?" I just looked at him and said nothing, because I knew any answer would be used as a reason, for a fight, for a dig, for whatever. And in moments like this, silence is almost a form of self-preservation, even if later I'll be mad at myself for keeping quiet. He started telling the kids that Mom's busy. She's got a show, and he said it in a tone they didn't catch, but I heard every note of it. Slightly exaggerated irony, laced with irritation, like I was some kind of imposter in someone else's family. And when the kids asked me for help, he added, "Careful, don't let it go to your head." Just loud enough for me to hear, and in that moment it felt like this wasn't the first time he'd said it, just the first time I was actually listening. In the evening, everything came apart. He started by saying I forgot to buy salt, then said dinner was cold, then, like it was nothing, threw out, "You were always a little cold, but now you're just absent. Maybe you should just go live in your phone." And I don't know why exactly at that moment, but I suddenly said out loud what I'd been turning over in my head for a while. "You didn't notice until I became interesting to someone else." He left without saying a word, slamming the door so hard an old photo on the wall almost fell off. A couple of hours later he came back, with an expression of exhaustion that looked slightly performed, sat on the edge of a chair and quietly said, "Don't you think the kids have gotten more restless since you started doing all this?" And it wasn't about the kids. It was a hit, careful and calculated, right where it hurts, because I'd thought the same sometimes myself, that maybe I'm throwing something off, upsetting some balance, and he knew it. The next morning, the teacher messaged me, a short note asking if everything was okay at home, because our daughter said Mom is always cooking and Dad said not to bother her. I read it 3 times while standing in the school hallway, and I wanted to sit right there on the floor, because suddenly I felt guilty just for deciding to do something for myself. And in the evening, everything happened all at once. He said sharply, "Do you really think you can make money from this?" And then what? I'm just a shadow? I was standing by the sink, a knife in my hand, peeling apples, and couldn't understand how. Out of everything between us, he chose this. Money. The fear that I might suddenly become more important, more noticeable. And he suddenly said, "You shouldn't be earning more than me. That's not normal." I didn't respond. The kitchen was quiet, only the kettle hissing, and in that silence everything became crystal clear, because he wasn't afraid I'd leave, or that I'd changed. He was afraid that now I wasn't beneath him, that he wasn't the main one, that I could, that I had others, people who watched, listened, heard. He added, "You're breaking the whole dynamic. I didn't sign up to be the husband of a blogger." I didn't argue. I just posted a video. Baked apples in case someone's tired of you. No caption, no text, just hands, the oven, cinnamon, and the sound of a knife against the cutting board. Lately, it feels like someone turned down the volume on everything in the apartment, like someone silently adjusted an invisible dial, and now even the kids whisper, "Play almost without sound. Don't argue over who gets to turn on cartoons." And Mike has gotten so quiet that his silence makes the air in the rooms feel thicker. He doesn't joke, doesn't ask anything, doesn't make remarks. He just sits in front of his monitor, clicking the mouse in a rhythm that always somehow matches the dripping tap, staring at the screen like he's waiting for this whole strange story to be over and for everything to go back to normal. Only I no longer think that normal was ever really normal. When the first real payment came through, actual money, not symbolic, not a gift, but for work, I didn't know what to do with it for a while. Just stared at the number, not quite believing that something so domestic, like a video of beans or a pie, could suddenly become income. And yet that same day I bought the kids a set of paints, the kind with glitter and big bottles they'd been asking for, and a new frying pan with a heavy bottom because the old one had started to creak and the handle was barely hanging on one last screw. And I remember how, at the checkout, I pulled out my card and realized I wasn't feeling shame or anxiety. Just a bit of nervous excitement, like a teenager buying something with their own money for the first time. In the evening, Mike found the receipt in the grocery bag, didn't ask anything directly, just placed it next to my mug, sat down across from me, and after a long pause said, with that same tight-lipped smile that always comes before something unpleasant, "So, that's it? You're the breadwinner now? Can I quit my job?" And I just said, not raising my voice or lowering my eyes, "It's just money, small money, that's all." To which he immediately, without waiting for me to add anything else, said, "Money is power. If it's power you want, just say so." And I felt that old string between us tighten again, the one we hadn't touched in a while, but that still vibrated at the slightest pull. The next day, while I stood at the sink peeling apples, our older son came into the kitchen, stood beside me quietly like he wasn't sure he was allowed, and then, almost whispering, asked, "Mom, why don't you sleep with Dad anymore?" And I was so caught off guard that I almost dropped the knife, but I managed to smile, maybe too forced, and said, "Sometimes grown-ups need to think by themselves." And he nodded in a way that made me feel like he understood a lot more than he let on. And that didn't make it easier. It made it worse, like someone had dragged into the light something I was still trying to keep in the shadows. In the evening, as I sat on the hallway floor, leaning against the wall with a cup of tea that had gone cold and to which I never added honey, Mike passed by, stopped for a second, looked at me quickly and muttered, "You're building a new life where there's no room for me. Maybe in your next video you'll use the hashtag #SAWSingleMom?" And I didn't react. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was too tired to fight over every line. Too tired to keep proving that I'm not doing this against him. I'm just finally doing something for and for myself. I went to the kitchen, pulled out a glass dish, set up baked beans with garlic and tomatoes, the same ones we used to cook together and laugh that they felt like student survival food, and turned on the camera, didn't say a word, just filmed. Baked beans. For when you don't know how to say you're tired. No text, no caption, no voice, just the sound of the oven door opening, drops of olive oil, and the spoon scraping the pan. And strangely, this video got more views than anything I had posted in the last 2 weeks, and I didn't even know whether to feel happy about that or a little sad. One subscriber left a comment, "You don't owe anyone an explanation, just live." And for the first time in this whole story, I read a phrase like that and didn't roll my eyes, didn't mutter, "Yeah, sure," but instead froze for a second, because suddenly I realized it wasn't a cliché, not some check-the-box kind of encouragement, but a simple, honest, real truth, one I maybe hadn't even dared to tell myself out loud. Later, when I had almost closed my laptop and was about to go to bed, Mike came up to me, not looking directly, and said, If you're going to keep doing this, I'll have to reconsider my responsibilities. And I understood that it wasn't a threat, not a warning, but just another attempt to grab back control, to set a boundary that no longer existed. And instead of opening a discussion, I just said, "Okay." And he walked away, didn't slam a door, didn't sigh loudly, just went and lay down on the couch. And I stayed in the kitchen, turned on the stove, started making soup, just for me, slowly cut up a carrot, dropped in a bay leaf, added 2 potatoes, and did it all in silence, with headphones in, playing some old instrumental track that had the crackle of tape. And suddenly I felt such a strange calm that, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilt, only exhaustion, and a steady, warm, not sharp feeling. Something like a boundary I no longer felt the need to explain to anyone. I submitted documents for a food photography course at Tacoma Community College not because I wanted to run away, and not because I believed it would somehow save my life or suddenly change its direction, but because I just needed to take at least one step that goes somewhere. Not away from, but toward. This course is short, not a degree, not a career, but in the application under goal, I wrote, to see something beautiful, even when it's hard. A Patreon appeared. I hadn't planned to launch one. I honestly thought it felt like asking. And asking has always felt shameful, especially when you've spent your whole life trying to be easy to deal with. But followers were writing themselves, saying they wanted to support, not for the recipes, but for the feeling they got when they watched my videos, like someone was keeping watch over them, silently. No advice, no pressure. For a long time I didn't know how to feel about it, but then I just clicked, publish. And there it was. The kids are often nearby now when I film, not on screen, no, but in the kitchen, on the other side of the camera, turning on the lights, handing me napkins, arguing over which crunch sounds tastier. And sometimes, when it's all recorded, we listen back together, and the youngest says, "I like how you breathe when you stir the dough." And that's when I think that maybe we really can get through this, not apart, but somehow together, just in a new way. I recorded a video called Baked Bread when everything's been survived. No words, just the crust cracking, slow breathing, the sound of cloth being lifted off the bowl. No one's crying, no one's talking, just bread. Just a moment where it doesn't hurt anymore, but it's not easy yet either. One evening, Mike quietly packed a bag. There was no scene, no yelling, no final speech, just the sound of a zipper, the click of a closet door, and there he was in the hallway, wearing a jacket he hadn't worn in ages, saying, "I don't know when I'll be back," without looking at me. I didn't ask. I just nodded, walked over and closed the door behind him. Then I poured myself soup, into a cup that cracked a year ago but still holds its shape. I sat on the edge of the bed, ate slowly, not thinking about the taste, just to fill something inside, and for the first time in a long while, I realized I could be alone in a room and not feel like that meant I'd lost. I called the kids to the table. They came in sleepy, in pajamas, one with a scraped knee and the other carrying a fluffy rabbit under their arm. And the younger one suddenly asked, "Mom, are you famous now?" I looked at him, then at the older one sitting like a grown-up, and said, "Now I'm real." And we ate in silence, not because there were no words, but because none were needed. The next video I titled, "Everyone Will Be Okay Soup." Just vegetables, broth, the sound of the knife, the stove, steam, a spoon against the bowl. In the comments, people shared long stories, said thank you, some even sent photos, plates of soup, little notes, short videos of them eating alone. I didn't reply to any of it. I just posted the next recipe. Later, I opened my old videos, re-watched them and deleted almost half. The ones that were for the trend, or where I tried to seem light when things were heavy, the ones where it wasn't me, just a mask. I left only the ones that tell the truth, even without words, even just through the sound of a spoon, through breath, through the undercooked edge. The house is quiet now. Not the kind of dead silence that rings in your ears, but quiet like water early in the morning, like the kitchen while everyone's still asleep, like the kind of quiet where you're no longer afraid to hear yourself. It's not emptiness anymore. It's peace.